So the second thing I'm going to talk about is something that we call the admin portal. So what is this? So the problem here that we're solving is actually that SSO setup is really complex. So what Taylor just showed you around integrating WorkOS SSO to actually connect it to your application through oAuth is really, really easy. That's one integration you do and then you're done. But the identity systems need to be configured to connect to your product. And that means the actual Okta configuration, the actual Microsoft ADFS configuration, SAML configuration. And the problem here is that the actual way that they get set up is also fragmented and complex. Today, how people do this is they have X509 certificates being emailed back and forth. There might be encoding issues. There's these like metadata files that are not standard that get shared with the IDP URLs in it. XML canonicalization is really a dark, deep hole of technical complexity. There's been a lot of huge security issues by people implementing this poorly with SAML assertions, including some companies being hacked in the past. And actually, in addition to doing all this, you have to validate the return to SAML attributes. SAML is such an open spec, there's not as many requirements. So there's a lot of ways the actual setup can go wrong. Once you get it working, it's usually okay, but this is really complex. And it's even more complex with Microsoft ADFS and OpenID Connect and these other protocols. So this results in this really painful experience, honestly, with your customers. You'll sign a big deal and then you'll just have this like headache of trying to integrate and going back and forth with sales engineers, your support reps, or your integration specialists. You have to hire a team to do this. And this is just a huge pain. And it doesn't need to be this way. So we decided to solve this too. So our solution here is we actually provide you the UI to set up SSO. For the end user, the enterprise admin to set up SSO. This is really, really fast and simple to integrate with your app. Again, it's just a few lines of code. We'll show that in a demo in a few minutes. And what we include here is inline documentation for the enterprise IT admin to actually know how to set stuff up. And this includes for generic SAML. So this is actually how the enterprise IT admin is going to configure that Okta app and actually integrate it. We show them using screenshots. We handle all the edge cases, error states. We constantly are testing this. We have a lot of test accounts with many different environments. And really what we've built here is like a fail-proof flow for the IT department. So you don't have to have that, product specialist or sales engineer or somebody manually doing this. You just drop this in, you drop in the admin console and it's done. So here's really quickly what it looks like. So this is actually a full screen experience. You take over the UI and the IT admin will go through this and set up their identity system. And it's kind of like a wizard that they move through every step, right? We can customize this to your branding. We can white label it. This is just the default one, so we're picking Okta here. And then when the ITM actually goes through, when the IT admin goes through here and clicks next, this is what I meant by the documentation. So we actually have updated screenshots of the Okta interface inside of this. So you don't have to be an Okta wizard or an Okta genius to figure out how to do this. You just walk through this. It's like a tutorial, and we have these nice kind of setup steps, for actually moving through this. I kind of thought about this as like, like TurboTax, when you go through step by step and fill out your taxes. It's kind of like that. It takes this really, really complex, really, really fragmented, multiple paths you could take scenario, and distills it down into an easy to follow flow. So this is the admin portal. And we're going to show you how to actually integrate this with Memex. So actually how to use it. And for this, I'm going to hand it over to Max, who's an engineer on our team, to walk us through it. Max?
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. So I'm going to first walk through the code to integrate, and then I'm going to show you all a demo of the admin portal. Let's get started. So there's 3 small steps to get started with the admin portal. First, you have to create a session. So this session defines your organization, and it defines the scopes. So this means what domains, which connections or directories that the session has access to. And you create this using your secret API key on your backend. And with this session, you then just redirect the user to this URL that you have just created. So you can imagine that this is behind a setup SSO button in your settings page, and it goes to your backend. It authenticates that the user is who they need to be. Then it creates this admin portal session with our SDK, and then you redirect to this URL. So at this point, the enterprise admin, they're looking at this admin portal, and they're going to be configuring SSO or directory sync. And in order to notify your application that their configuration was successful, we have a webhook API. So with a webhook API callback, you can be notified when a connection is a configuration for SSO, has been created or updated. And with this information, you can update UI or change the authentication so that the entire organization can use WorkOS's SSO instead of username and password or whatever authentication method you had prior. So let's jump into the code, show y'all an example. So this is a little walkthrough of how to create that portal session. So you can see here that we are using the WorkOS SDK, and we pass in an intent parameter. So the admin portal has many different intents. And for our example, we're going to be configuring SSO. So we're just going to provide SSO as an intent here. Next, you're passing in a reference to the organization that that you want the session to be used for. And we're just grabbing this off the current user. And then finally, we're providing a return URL. And this is where the enterprise admin will end up after their session ends. Yeah. And then the next step, all we do is just redirect to the session URL. So that's a simple one-liner in Ruby, as you all may know. And then finally, we are configuring our webhook controller here. So we receive a connection, and we check if the status is linked. Linked means that it's ready to go. It's been tested already. So if this is the case, we just take the organization out of our database, and we update the provider with the connection, with the provider that the connection was configured with. So if the user has set up SSO with Okta, they'll get a notification here at this webhook endpoint, and then we update our database so we can show a different UI later. And with that, let's give a little demo. Awesome. So here I am at our Memex application. And if I go to our settings page, you can see that we have a setup with SSO button right here. So when I click this, it's going to redirect to that authentication endpoint. It's going to create a session, and then it's going to redirect us to the session. And we end up at the admin portal. So we have a list of integrations here. We're going to choose Okta for this demonstration. And you can see, as Michael was talking earlier, you're presented with a pretty great documentation experience. And remember that this is for your enterprise, your customer. So this is all information that y'all don't have to understand. You don't have to create test accounts with Okta or write documentation yourself on how to integrate with all these integrations. We've done that for you, and this really creates a much better experience for your customers and for your sales team and your development team. So we're going to be creating this Okta application. So reading this documentation, it looks like I'm going to have to copy this single sign-on URL and create an app inside of Okta. So let's go do that. So I'm an Okta admin right now. We're going to go through those steps. We'll call this Memex and continue. So here's that single sign-on URL. We're going to put it right there as well. Let's continue here. All right, so we're going to be configuring some attribute statements. So I'm going to take a good look at these. And if they were more complicated, I could just copy them over, but I can fill these out on my own. You guys can imagine I've done this a lot. So there we go. Perfect. And we select continue. All right, so now we have to get those setup instructions. So I'm going to go through this little vendor thing. And before we jump over to that, I'm going to assign my current user. So it's just the demo account. That's who I'm logged in right now. If we didn't do the assignment, then I wouldn't be able to log into this application. So we'll go back over here and we'll click view those setup instructions. And it looks like we just have to provide some inputs here. So copy these over. Got a certificate to upload. Just drag that onto there. Awesome. So right now, our API is now determining whether this configuration was successful. We're sending a test request to Okta with a SAML request for the really deep inside of what we're doing. But if something didn't really work out, we would have shown an error state with additional documentation on how to fix it. In addition, we also just sent a webhook request to Memex, notifying it that the configuration was successful and that we chose Okta as a provider. So inside of the admin portal, I'm able to now to test the single sign-on. So this will log me in with Okta and then take me back to Memex. So let's go do that. So I already have an active session with Okta, so I'm not being prompted. And we're being redirected right now to get Memex. It's on a hobby dyno right now, so it could be taking some time. There we go. So I was just logged in with Okta and taken back to Memex as an authenticated Okta user. And if I go back to my settings page, you can see here that we're now connected with Okta because that webhook notification let our application know that this organization has now configured SSO with Okta. So that is the admin portal. Thank you. Back to you, Michael.
Awesome, thanks, Max. So that's the WorkOS admin portal. There's a ton of stuff inside of it that we didn't show also around many different providers, but you get the idea where there's the same type of screenshots and the same UI, whether you're setting up Okta, Microsoft ADFS, Ping Identity, OneLogin, any of these systems, we've built it end to end. So this handles the complex UI flow for configuring any type of SSO connections. This also has a level of enhanced security for your application where you never have to store these certificates and auth tokens. The admin portal is communicating directly between your enterprise admin, your customer, between them and WorkOS. So you never have to build this UI and handle that type of sensitive data. And the last thing is there's best of class documentation in here. So anytime one of these systems updates their UI, updates their docs, we update the admin portal. So you can think about that almost as a product that we're providing to you. And this saves, hard to say, months of time. We've been working on this for quite a while. So we're really, really, really excited to roll this out for you all.